Schedule O of Form 5471 needs to be filed only by Category 2 and Category 3 filers. Category 2 filers fill out Part 1, and Category 3 filers complete Part 2. At the top of Schedule O, you put the name of the U.S. person filing the form and their U.S. identifying number. Then you list the name of the foreign corporation. Most foreign corporations do not have a U.S. EIN. Part 1 is filled out by U.S. officers and directors, and provides information about the U.S. shareholders and their acquisitions of shares in the foreign corporation. For example, the name, the address of the shareholder, and the identifying number of the shareholder, the date of the original 10% acquisition, and if applicable, the date of any additional 10% acquisition of shares. Part 2 is broken into sections A through F. Section A has basic information about the U.S. shareholders, including the name, address, identifying number, the type of tax return filed by that shareholder, the date the return was filed, where it was filed, and if applicable, the last time the shareholder filed a Schedule O for this foreign corporation. Note that Category 3 filers include individuals who become U.S. residents during the year. So if a non-resident alien moves to the U.S. during the year and becomes a U.S. person for that year, for purposes of filing Form 5471, the individual is effectively treated as having acquired the shares of the foreign corporation when they move to the U.S. Just as Part 1 had U.S. officers and directors tattling on U.S. shareholders, Part 2, Section B, has U.S. shareholders tattling on U.S. officers and directors. In Section C, you list the details of the acquisition of shares of stock, such as the name of the shareholder acquiring the shares, the class of shares acquired, the date of the acquisition, the method of the acquisition, and the number of shares acquired directly, indirectly, or constructively. The ownership rules can get a bit complicated. At the top of page 2, Section C continues, where you list the amount paid for the shares and the name and address of the person from whom you acquired the shares. You complete Section D if the U.S. shareholder disposed of the shares, listing pretty much the same information as with the acquisition of the shares. Section E is completed if the corporation was just organized or reorganized. For example, if the foreign corporation was just organized, you list the names and addresses of the transferors, their identifying numbers, the dates of the transfers, descriptions of the assets transferred, the fair market value and adjusted basis of the assets transferred, and the securities issued by the foreign corporation, typically shares of stock such as common or preferred stock. Item A of Section F requires that a statement be attached if the foreign corporation or a predecessor U.S. corporation filed a U.S. tax return for any of the last 3 years. Item B of Section F asks for the date of any reorganization of the foreign corporation that occurred during the last 4 years while any U.S. person owned 10% or more of the foreign corporation. Lastly, Item C requires that an entity chart be attached if the foreign corporation is a member of a group.